If you don't know this about me, I love stupid competitions. Whenever it comes to like dumb bragging right kind of things, I'm a big fan of those. I remember when I was in college, we would play NCAA football 2007. I'm aging myself a little bit, but we would play for hours and hours and hours on end. And the goal was for me and my two buddies that we would do this with to see who could keep the longest win streak, right? To stay on the PlayStation as late as you possibly could. I was winning. I had a record of 12, and they could never touch it. I'm just saying. Challenge anytime we can play. Let's go ahead. But there's like different I'm all about like dumb competitions. When I was in seminary, one of the things we tried to do is we had like there was four of us, me and three other guys, and we all realized very quickly that we were fat. And we had a deal where we said, okay, what we're going to do is in a semester we are going to do a biggest loser between the four of us. Right? So I remember like we made this big challenge. We said, look, whoever loses the most weight by the end of the year, like the winner is going to get treated to like an awesome dinner. Fat people, dinner, incentive, food, right? Like it was going to work great. So we had like this whole plan. We were going to go to Ruth Chris. Like we were going to like do it up, run the bill up because the loser was going to have to pay for the winner. And it was going to be like just a big thing and a big celebration. I remember like as we were going through the semester, each one of us kind of had like a healthy guy who was going to be our coach, and me and Father Bryce were like teamed up, and he was going to like help me game the system. He's like, look, you're just going to down a gallon of water like 2 days before, and you're going to drop like 4 pounds, and we're going to win that way. And when I started seeing that I was losing to other guys, what I would do is I would grab like a piece of cake from the line at lunch, and I would just go put it on their table and leave it and walk away. And I'm like, it's like the box with the cake with like the stick, like on a cartoon. But anyway, like I just remember like there were like these different ways of like, it was just a dumb competition. I did win, lost like 26 pounds in a semester, but no big deal. But like, I just remember like, and that steak was really good. But I just remember like, it was like dumb competitions like this, I always find, especially when I'm with other guys, these kind of dumb competitions just kind of rise to the surface. And it's interesting. I have to remind myself when we're reading Scripture, and I think I might be projecting, but I think we do this a lot, where we look at the figures in Scripture and we think of them as these like mythological people, right? These people that lived so long ago in a land far, far away. It's like Star Wars, but like in the Bible, right? Like it's there's something about it though that we have to remember very clearly, that these are real people that were doing real stuff. Because if we look at today's gospel, for example, and we kind of try and contextualize it, Jesus called 12 men, right? He calls Peter, James, John, Andrew, Thomas, James, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Simon, and he calls all these people to himself, and he's going to like form them and teach them and bring them about in the early church, right? He is bringing about the formation in these men, in these 12 apostles. And in any kind of group dynamics like that, you put 12 men together, you're going to have stupid competitions that are going to rise to the surface, right? Different kind of things, like different kind of like prideful moments are just going to kind of come up, right? Competition is natural, especially when it comes to men, but like competition's natural and usually is a good thing, but it can go a little bit crazy. And that's what we see today in our gospel. That the competition kind of goes crazy, and the competition kind of goes to the head of James and John in particular. Because what we hear in Scripture is repeatedly that Jesus' kind of inner circle of the apostles is Peter, James, and John. Right? Peter, James, and John are at the transfiguration. Peter, James, and John are the ones that are brought into like certain healings, like when he raises the little girl from being dead to now alive. Peter, James, and John are the ones that are going to be at the agony in the garden, right? Like Peter, James, and John are kind of the inner circle of the apostles. So I got to believe that when you have these 12 men who are real, normal guys, and as they kind of see this like little bit of a hierarchy almost starting to kind of set up, if I'm James or if I'm John at the time, like I put myself there, I might be feeling kind of full of myself. Like, look, check it out. I know the Son of God, and He's the Messiah and all these things, and I'm one of the chosen ones. What's up? Like I would have to, like, there's like part of me that like would believe that they would just have this kind of competition, kind of this like measuring each other up kind of thing going on, and that they would see themselves maybe a little bit greater than the rest. I might be projecting, but I think that's kind of what sparks today's gospel. But notice, there's something interesting with James and John that I want us to, I think it helps us to kind of contextualize it, and I think it actually helps us to kind of understand like the teaching that Jesus is really giving to his apostles in the gospel today. James and John make a massive error. They have a massive miscalculation. They are working off of a completely different kind of image, a completely different kind of like mission of what it is that Jesus is coming to do and coming to establish. They're thinking in a broken way to what Jesus is actually doing. They mix up honor for fulfillment. They mix up honor and fulfillment. Jesus did not come just to establish places of honor. He came so that we as human beings could be fulfilled. But they mix up honor and fulfillment. How do they do this? Let's look at the gospel. The first way that James and John, when they come up to Jesus, this is the first phrase that they say to him: "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." Like, we got a plan, and we just want you to answer our plan. We just want you to make our plan come true. Like, whatever it is, Jesus, that we say next, we just want you to like grant that wish, right? The genie, like, I just want you, God, to do what I want you to do in the way that I want you to do it, when I want you to do it, how I want you to do it. I want you, God, to fulfill my next request. I know that's so foreign to what we might approach, how we might approach God, right? That was sarcasm. But anyway. Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left. Now, when we think of somebody, when we think as a Christian 2,000 years after Jesus, we might miss the context here a little bit. But if you think like a first century Jew, and you think like somebody who is formed in the Old Testament, right? This image of sitting at your right and your left, right? The king establishing a kingdom, right? He's got his throne, and sitting at his right and his left are his main subjects, right? They would share in the authority of the king. Right? So when James and John are asking to sit one at the right and one at the left, what they're actually saying is like, make it official that we're your favorites. Make it official that we are the ones that are going to be able to rule over everybody else, including those other 10. Right? Like, make it where that me and my brother, that like the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder as they come to know, like, make it where we are the ones that basically get to reign over everybody else in your name. Fulfill what I want, when I want it, and how I want it. They're striving for honor. They're striving for status. They're driven by pure ambition, and that's it. Do what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, and how I want you to do it. Years ago, I was sitting with my spirit. When I was first ordained a priest, I was talking to my spiritual director, and he and I were having this conversation, and he said, I was just telling him, I'm like, man, I was struggling. Like, it was the first, like, the honeymoon was over. Like, I was in a parish. I'm doing stuff. Like, I'm running around. I'm getting pulled in all these different directions. And it's just like a little bit of a transition time. And I remember I was talking to him, and I was just like, man, I got this going on, this going on, this going on, this going on. Like, I don't know what else to do. I'm trying to balance, like, multiple things and different, like, responsibilities and funerals and weddings and working with a school and like all these other things. And I told him, I said, like, I just feel like, he said, like, what does it feel like? I said, I feel like I'm sitting at my desk and Jesus walks in and I look at him and I'm like, can you take care of this? Can you take care of this? Can you take care of this? I got the rest, but you just take care of a few things for me. And he looks at me, he started laughing. I was on the phone with him. And I hear him laughing, and I'm like, what? What's so funny? Like, please, tell me the secret. And he says, you're sitting in the wrong chair. I was like, what you mean? He says, you're a kid sitting in your dad's chair thinking you're the boss. And it made sense. Still fight with that. I want you to fulfill what I want, when I want, and how I want, Jesus. I want to be in the honor position. I want to be able to do the things I want to do. I want to be able to do the things when I want to do them. Like, I want to be able to have my plan fulfilled in your name. That's not how God works. And in fact, Jesus makes a point, right, to undercut that plan with James and John. Like I think sometimes in our world, like in our life, right, we can be driven by this like unfettered ambition. We can be driven by like this my plan. I have an idea. God, I want you to fulfill what I want, when I want, how I want, right? We can have this kind of mentality where we throw it at God and we say, if you don't do this, then something's wrong with you, not me. Because we're striving for honor. We're striving for worldly things and confusing it with fulfillment. Now, one caveat, doing things well, right? Like trying to like be excellent at what you're doing, that's not a bad thing. But it's when we're driven by just that, just by status. If I only get this job, then I can be happy. If I only get this promotion, then I can be happy. If I just would have this position in my fraternity, in my sorority, in this club, in the band, on the football team, on whatever, like if I could only have these things, then I would be happy. Then I would be fulfilled. I'm just letting you know right now, all of those things are passing and they're useless in the long run. And our world has a tendency, our culture has a tendency, I think we oftentimes have a tendency to confuse honor, these positions, titles, with fulfillment. Notice how Jesus' response to James and John. His response is not looking at James and John and being like, I can't believe you, you're dumb, you're stupid, or anything like that, right? I can't believe you, you need to stop this. He looks at him and he says, can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink of? If you want to enter into my glory, if you want to enter into my kingdom, if you want to be greatest in the kingdom of heaven, right, like you're asking for, can you do the things I'm going to do? And they're excited. They say, yeah, absolutely. They don't realize that when Jesus says, the cup that I'm going to drink of, what he's talking about is the cup of suffering. The same cup that he's going to pray would pass from him at the agony in the garden, right? The same cup that on the eve of the day he died, that he prayed that would pass from him so he wouldn't have to go through it, right? Like, that's the cup that he's saying, can you drink from? What Jesus is doing there is he's not trying to yell at, he's not trying to embarrass James and John. But what he's doing is he's inviting them into his life. He's inviting them into his mission. He's saying, you will do those things. And you'll do those things in my name. But at some point, you're not going to strive for honor anymore. You're going to recognize that I'm the way to fulfillment. When I was, it was in 2021, so a couple of weeks after Hurricane Ida passed, I had my annual retreat was scheduled. So I was doing my retreat at Mundelein Seminary outside of Chicago, and it was myself and probably about 70 guys from around the Midwest. And it was my spiritual director and I were there, and I remember when I got there, we started with like a meeting, and they asked us, they were like, what is it that you want from the retreat? And I said, I want running water, and I want a light to work. And they like kind of looked at me, and I was like, And I explained I was coming back from the hurricane and all this kind of stuff. But I just remember like walking into this storm. Now, walking into this retreat after storm recovery where like we're giving out meals and we're doing all this stuff and we're like boarding up buildings and we're like fixing things, and we had stayed in like all of the recovery from right after the storm had passed, right? Like that's what I was walking out of into retreat. And I remember when I went on retreat, there was just all of this junk, all this garbage of like not just the storm, but everything after the storm and recovery and dealing with insurance and dealing with all these kind of cleanup and all this other kind of stuff. And we had a building that was destroyed on campus at my parish and all these things. I just remember going through all this stuff, and I was just carrying it all into retreat. So 8-day silent retreat. I sit down, I'm praying, and I remember at one point I was talking to my director, and I just started to kind of let all this stuff out. Like it just kind of was just there, and finally I was just talking about it. And he looked at me and he said, "Go into prayer and just ask God, where were you?" And it wasn't like I can't believe you abandoned me, where were you? Like it wasn't a yelling thing. It was just like with all of this stuff, all of this recovery, all of this like emergency kind of like response stuff, like, okay, God, where have you been? I'm sitting in prayer, sitting in my chair, right, in this little chapel. And I just asked the Lord, I said, where have you been for the last 6 weeks? Like since the storm passed. And as I'm sitting there with my book, like I got my Bible, and it was a Bible that I didn't use very often, but like I moved at some point, like I think I crossed my legs or something, and a prayer card slipped out. And a little prayer card that I'd forgot about. I grab it, and I remember it was a picture of Jesus. And it was the image was it's a famous image, but it was like it's like got a red kind of tint to it. He's got a crown of thorns. You see like the blood and the sweat coming down his side of his face, like he's kind of beaten up a little bit. You can see in his eyes that they're kind of puffy because he's been like, you can see almost like tears, and he's tired. And I remember looking at that prayer card and the Lord just saying, "Do you recognize those eyes?" And I remember thinking, yeah, because those are the same eyes that look back at me every time I'm brushing my teeth. That Jesus' eyes in that image were my eyes. And it just like what was making sense, what just like came up in that prayer, and talking to my director, and was like kind of the grace of that retreat. I remember it was just this clear understanding that what I have gone through, the hell that I had gone through for 6 weeks, all the stuff, all the struggle, all the tired, all the hurt, all the anger, all the frustration, all of that stuff was not just mine, but that Jesus had been in and with me in every bit of it. That like my frustration was his frustration. My anger was his anger. My hopelessness was his hopelessness. My fear was his fear. Every single thing that I had been going through for those 6 weeks was his as well. And to be honest with y'all, like when we don't confuse honor for fulfillment, and we see that our call as Christians is to be with God, right? Everything that we experience in life becomes something that we experience with the Lord, right? Jesus steps down. Why? So that your happiness can be his. Your disappointment can be his. Your fear can be his. That everything that we experience as human beings is meant to be shared with God. And it becomes moments of intimacy. That we would never confuse external honor for internal fulfillment. This is what he invites the apostles into. Can you drink of the cup that I drink of? Can you experience the kingdom, the glory of the kingdom that I'm trying to establish? This is the way to do it. He does not say, then go and achieve something, go and do something, go and get another title, go and get another crown, go and get another position, go and get another something else, like get another degree. No, he says, then come to me, all you who labor and are burdened. Right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus continues to show himself as being the one way to ultimate fulfillment. The externals burn away. The externals lose their meaning. Achievements become hollow. But our ultimate fulfillment lies in our relationship with the Lord. This is why he looks at the other apostles whenever James and John kind of like go back and it's like, really, y'all were talking bad about us, right? Like, this is why he looks at the other apostles and what does he say? He looks at them and he tells them, he says, this is not going to be the case for you. This is the world. This is how the world thinks. This is not how you're going to think. Because I don't think of like the world. Our second reading today. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been similarly tested in every way without sin. Jesus did not come to earth just so that he could be a thought leader, just so that he could say some fun stuff, do some cool stuff, and die on a cross. He came so that he could prove to us, he could pave a way for us, as the Second Vatican Council says, that he could be a trailblazer for us and a model for us of how we're called to live as well, so that he could say, I have been through everything you have been through. I've experienced everything you have experienced. Joy, sadness, fear, hurt, disappointment, abandonment. I have experienced all of it and then some, and I can relate to you where you are. Your pain is my pain. Your joy is my joy. That brings us to fulfillment. And it's so much more impactful than just empty honor and a chair at the head of a table. Mother Teresa once said that the mission of Christians is not to be successful. It's to first be faithful. May today, as we come to Mass and as we dive into our relationship with God, that we continue to go into an ever-deepening relationship with God, that we would not be discouraged, or that we would not be overly focused on honor in the world. Because for the Christian, it's passing. But may we always remember that our ultimate fulfillment lies in an ever-deepening relationship with our Lord.